I just got done harvesting and preserving our first crop of tomatoes, and I got 24 jars out of just that first little flush of tomatoes. And I took my camera around to show you my process that is simple and easy, and hopefully it will be helpful to you in your kitchen. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you my super fast and easy process for putting up diced tomatoes, then some tips so that you have success the first time, and finally, some ways that I like to use diced tomatoes. Well, if this is your first time here, my name is Brianna, and my husband Gray and I like to learn, practice, and teach our children traditional skills. So there is really nothing like a summer garden without tomatoes. Regardless of the size garden we've grown every year, we always have tomatoes, and that is because it is the epitome of summer. These days we grow quite a few. This year we planted 40 tomato plants in long hedgerows, and the majority of those tomatoes are for storage, and so we only grow between 3 and 5 varieties of tomatoes. We've honed it in over the years. We experimented in the past with fun varieties and neat heirlooms, and have learned what we really like. And so for the storage tomatoes, we do a San Marzano, and I think it's called a Juliet. They're like a grape tomato, and they're bigger than a cherry tomato, and Roma. So we do those 3 for our storage tomatoes. Then we experiment and have fun with our slicers, the ones we eat fresh throughout the summer season. And so what you're seeing today is a combination of Juliet, San Marzano, and Roma that I'm going to be preserving into pint-sized jars for soups, stews, and any other way that I want to use them throughout the rest of the year. I do preserve tomatoes in different ways besides making diced tomatoes, but this is the first and, in my opinion, the best way to preserve them because they're so versatile and it's so fast and easy to do. And so we're incredibly busy throughout the summer months. We still homeschool throughout the summer and have tons of things going on outside that I like to keep it really streamlined and simple. And so if I have the time, I'll experiment with different sauces and recipes, but having just the go-tos, diced tomatoes that I can get up and shelf stable, and then later on, if I want to turn that into a pasta sauce during the slower winter months, I can do that. But during these very busy summer months, I just do diced tomatoes, and then I'll usually do some freeze drying of tomatoes and maybe a barbecue sauce or something like that. So I know that canning can seem like a lot of work. For me, putting on music or a podcast or an audiobook and just getting to work solo in the kitchen is very relaxing and a great way to spend an afternoon or day. But I typically am not alone, and so I usually have children with me in the kitchen, which I love as well. And I actually wrote an entire blog post on some tips to get canning done or big kitchen projects in general done with children. You can see that link in the description box below. So before we get started, I would like to mention the supplies that you're going to need. I will leave linked down below in the description box. I also have a video and a blog post about if you're a beginning canner and all of the things you might want to acquire before starting your first canning project, and some general tips if you've never done any canning before. This is an absolute basic, very easy to follow step-by-step instructions if you are a beginner canner. And I will leave that also linked in the description box below. But for today, let's jump into how I put up tomatoes easily and quickly. So the only thing that you're going to need to put up these tomatoes is tomatoes, lemon juice, and salt. Now, I do like to use bottled lemon juice. We put up lemon juice from our property, but since lemons grown outside can vary in acidity, I like to use the standard bottled lemon juice. It's easy, it's available, why not use it and save my home preserved lemon juice for other projects besides canning. So the first thing you want to do is gather all of your supplies. The key to successful and productive canning is to be prepared and to get everything you're going to need before you get started. Once you have all of your supplies and and everything done, sterilize your jars. Now you can use pint or quart in this recipe. I'm using pint today. I've used quart in the past, but I like the pint size because it's just the right amount for most of my recipes that I like to use these diced tomatoes with. Wash and sterilize your jars, and then cut your tomatoes. I am very loose with this. I had my daughter helping me cut them up. Large chunks, small chunks, it doesn't really matter, but I like to just get them general 1/2 inch to 1 inch size pieces and get those all in a really big bowl so that once you get started, you don't have to do any more slicing. After the jars have been sterilizing and are ready to be packed, make sure you have that lemon juice, that salt, a clean tea towel, and your big bowl of diced tomatoes ready. This is a cold raw pack recipe. So these tomatoes don't need to be cooked before you pack them into the jars. And so pull out that sterilized canning jar and set it on your laid out tea towel. I like to lay out a tea towel before I put my jar down just to protect my counter a little bit. So go ahead and pull out that sterilized jar and use your canning jar funnel and pack that jar full of tomatoes. Now there's going to be a lot of airspace, especially if you have made larger pieces of tomatoes, and so you're going to want to use an instrument to push the tomatoes down and get some of that airspace out of there. So we really want to be packing these down because otherwise you're going to have mostly, hold on, I actually have an example. These are 2 cans that I made this year. You can see that this one here I did not pay enough attention to and pack well enough, and there's a ton of airspace in there, which is fine, but I prefer to have more tomatoes per jar. Now there will be a little headspace, which you do want, that's purposeful, but you don't want to have so much that it almost seems like this is only about 2/3 of this jar is full. And so make sure to really do the work to pack the tomatoes down before you add the salt and the lemon juice. So while I'm packing those tomatoes, I'm also sterilizing my lids. You don't have to sterilize the rings. I like to, but you're going to be sterilizing your brand new canning jar lids. I have this really nifty sterilizing tool, but if you don't have one of these, then you can use a magnetic wand. That's what I've used every year in the past. This is just pretty handy because I can do it all at once, and I am not fishing for the individual canning lids. And I will try to find this. This was a gift. I'm going to try to find this product for you and link it down also in the description box below. Once the jars are full, I like to do the salt. So we're going to be doing 1/2 teaspoon of salt to 1 tablespoon of lemon juice if you're doing the pint. Now, if you're doing the quart, I have those conversions on the corresponding blog post that I will also leave linked down below. Once you have your tomatoes, your lemon juice, and your salt, take a clean rag and simply wipe the edge of the rim just so that nothing interferes with the seal. A little grain of salt can interfere with that seal. And so wipe those clean and then pull out your sterilized lids. Screw the jars on finger tight and then carefully lift them back down into your boiling water bath canner. So go ahead and process these for 85 minutes. So they're going to be sitting on the stove for quite a while, in which case you are free to go and do something else until it's time for your next batch. And remove the jars from the canner and set them on a cooling rack. Be careful not to touch them. I don't even check the seals for it until at least the next day, until they are completely cool, because you pushing on the seals can actually interfere with a natural seal. And so pull them out, let them completely cool. You might hear some popping right away. After they are completely cooled, go ahead and check your seals. Remove the ring and wipe down the jars. Remember to label the top of your lid with the contents and the date that you preserved these tomatoes. Go ahead and put them up on your pantry, and that is all there is to it. It is a very simple and easy recipe to make. So now on to the tips. The first one I mentioned a little bit earlier is just to use bottled lemon juice. I am sure that fresh lemon juice would be just fine, but I like to be safe. Use the bottled lemon juice. It's easy, it's available. If in a pinch you want to try fresh, I'm sure it would be fine, but I like to just use the bottled lemon juice. The next step is to use high quality ripe tomatoes. So we are pulling these tomatoes straight from our garden, and so they are fresh and full of flavor, and that's what makes a really beautiful end product. And not only do you want them to be ripe, the next tip is to use the variety of tomato that's best suited for being canned. So I mentioned before that we use San Marzano. It's either Juliet or Julienne, I can't quite remember, but they're these little great tomatoes. Anyways, that are all a paste style variety. So pick something that has less juice and more meat to the tomato. And the last tip is to avoid canning in half-gallon sized jars. The biggest jar that I would use to make this recipe is a quart-sized jar. So you can do it in pint or quart. I do a variety of both depending on how fast I want to get my canning done for the season, but don't use a half-gallon jar. So great, you've got a ton of diced tomatoes on your shelf. Now we need to put them to use. And so I'm going to share with you the most common ways that we actually use these tomatoes in my kitchen. So the first is we make soups like minestrone, vegetable, tomato, basil. And so soups are a really big one. Then next in the fall, I make this really savory venison stew. I'll leave the link for that down below. And that has a tomato base as well. So stews, beef stew would be great, soups, chilies, and then you can also make homemade pasta sauce from these diced tomatoes, which is a really good option. And it's also why I don't make pasta sauce in the summer, because I would rather have the versatile preserved garden product and then later on make it into what I want to when it's time to do the cooking. Those are the most common ways that we use tomatoes. I would love to hear how you use them, because I'm always looking for new ways and how to use the fresh garden produce in my kitchen. And so if you have any other ideas, leave me a comment down below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!